Trump wants to reopen Alcatraz, but not for tours for prisoners. What's really going on behind this shocking plan? No one expected that. President Donald Trump dropped a headline so big it sent shockwaves across the country. Cameras were rolling, the crowd was roaring, and then came the words that left even the most seasoned political analysts speechless. We're reopening Alcatraz, and we're turning it into the most secure prison this country has ever seen. Up to that point, no government statements had hinted at any plan to revive the infamous prison island. But insiders now claim whispers started weeks earlier, hush-hush site visits, increased marine activity near the rock, even a quiet federal inspection. The Department of Justice has refused to comment, but satellite images showing equipment being ferried across the bay have already gone viral. So why now? Why Alcatraz? Trump didn't offer much detail. What he did say was this: we've got the worst criminals, we've got people trying to tear this country apart from the inside, and we're going to make sure they don't get the chance. That one line set off a firestorm. Some believe he's referring to high-profile cybercriminals, organized crime figures, or international agents caught spying on U.S. soil. Others are more skeptical, warning that vague labels like enemies of the country could spiral into something far more political. Legal scholars are already digging into the constitutional gray zones. Is Trump trying to build a fortress outside the reach of standard due process? Even supporters were caught off guard. They loved the idea, but they want to know more. Is this a maximum security facility for select cases or a prototype for something bigger? There's even talk online that this is just phase one of a nationwide plan to overhaul the justice system by removing its most dangerous elements from public view entirely. And then there's the island itself. Alcatraz is more than just rock and rust. It's a symbol of isolation, punishment, and the extremes of control. Critics call it a distraction tactic, a move to dominate headlines and shift attention from economic debates and international tension. But Trump's base? They're calling it a masterstroke, a bold return to hardline justice. One thing's certain, nobody's laughing. Journalists, lawyers, activists, even foreign leaders are watching closely. Is this just posturing? Or is a forgotten fortress about to become the center of America's most controversial crackdown? The moment President Trump mentioned reopening Alcatraz, the first question on everyone's mind wasn't how, it was who. Who exactly does he plan to send to a place once reserved for the most dangerous men in America? So far, no official list exists, but Trump's wording at the rally was deliberate and unsettlingly open-ended. He spoke of traitors, cartel bosses, terrorists, and those who attack our nation from within. That phrasing lit a fire across the political spectrum. Supporters saw justice, critics saw a slippery slope. If the plan goes through, it's unlikely we'll see average convicts heading to the rock. The assumption is that Alcatraz 2.0 would be a special facility, a kind of legal black hole for people considered threats beyond the norm. Names floated by pundits include high-level hackers, espionage suspects, and figures tied to organized crime rings. But there's growing concern that the criteria could expand. Who defines threat? What happens if that definition shifts over time? Whistleblowers, leakers, and controversial activists are also quietly being added to the conversation. Some worry this could be used to silence voices under the pretext of national security. It's not a far-fetched idea. Either history is full of leaders using prisons not just for punishment, but for control. And then there's the online speculation. One viral post suggested the prison could be used for high-profile arrests of corporate elites and foreign operatives. Another theory claims it's part of a larger crackdown campaign, targeting those who've evaded prosecution due to influence or wealth. Wild? Maybe. But in today's climate, even wild theories gain traction when uncertainty is this high. Legal experts are urging transparency. So far, they've received none. No clear criteria, no framework, no process, and yet the momentum keeps building. Behind closed doors, agencies may already be assembling lists, running background checks, and building protocols. Or maybe they aren't, and that's the problem. Nobody knows. One thing is clear: Trump's announcement wasn't just about reopening a prison. It was about redefining who deserves to be locked away. And that question, who gets locked up next, is what makes this plan as controversial as it is explosive. Forget the rusty bars and crumbling cells you've seen in old documentaries. If President Trump's plan goes forward, the new Alcatraz won't look like the haunted relic it is today. It'll look like something out of a science fiction movie and not the hopeful kind. Sources close to the administration have hinted that the proposed facility would be powered by next-generation security tech. We're talking full-spectrum surveillance, motion sensors woven into the walls, facial recognition at every door, and drones patrolling the airspace day and night. One early mock-up leaked online shows automated guard towers operated remotely from the mainland, complete with AI-powered targeting systems, similar to what some private military contractors have tested overseas. Even the cells themselves would change. Instead of steel bars and rattling doors, the concept images show solid transparent walls made from reinforced materials. Every room would be individually monitored, and inmate movements tracked in real time using biometric tags. Food would be delivered through mechanized hatches. Human contact? Minimal. And here's where it gets even stranger. There's talk of underwater access routes. Rumors are spreading about private contractors being consulted for constructing submarine tunnels, making it nearly impossible to approach or escape without detection. One of those companies? Allegedly tied to major names in tech and aerospace. The idea of Elon Musk's tunneling tech being adapted for prison security might sound far-fetched, but in today's world, it's not out of the question. Supporters of the plan say this is what's needed for the worst of the worst. A place so secure, so advanced, that escape is literally unthinkable. But others are warning that such isolation, combined with zero transparency, could set a dangerous precedent. If this much power is put into a place hidden away from the public eye, what safeguards are left? There's also a creeping fear that this won't be a one-time build. That Alcatraz could become a prototype, the first of a new wave of smart prisons with minimal human oversight and maximum control. If that happens, this island could mark the start of a very different era in law enforcement. As soon as Trump's Alcatraz plan hit the news, the internet did what it does best: dig deep, connect dots, and stir up wild theories. One in particular rose to the surface fast, and while it sounds outrageous on paper, it's gaining traction for a reason. They're calling it the billionaire prison theory. At its core, the theory claims that Alcatraz isn't being reopened just to house dangerous criminals. No, it's being prepped for a different kind of prisoner. The ultra-rich, the politically connected, and the ones who've gotten away with too much for too long. People who've been untouchable. Until now. It started when users noticed that several federal investigations into financial corruption suddenly went quiet right around the same time as the Alcatraz buzz began. Add to that a few anonymous leaks suggesting that high-level audits were being reactivated behind closed doors, and you've got the start of a digital storm. One post even named names claiming certain CEOs were quietly added to a government review list weeks before Trump's announcement. Of course, there's no official proof. No, but that hasn't stopped the speculation. Videos are popping up across social platforms, analyzing body language from past press conferences, tracking jet movements to San Francisco, and claiming that this prison isn't about punishment, it's about pressure. The theory suggests Alcatraz could be used not just for incarceration, but for leverage. A place to send someone when legal routes hit a wall, but the government still wants answers. Even more interesting, the chatter about special cells. Rooms allegedly being outfitted not with bars, but with desks, monitors, and secured comm lines. Could some of the inmates be forced to work off their crimes? Contribute intelligence in exchange for protection or lighter sentences? The idea's been floated before, but never in a setting like this. Supporters of the theory see this as a bold move against corruption. A power play to show that no one, not even the ultra-wealthy, is above justice. Critics, on the other hand, see it as a dangerous precedent. A move towards secret detentions and shadow trials. A system where who you are or who you know determines whether you disappear behind the fog. Even entertainment news is feeding the fire, comparing the concept to dystopian thrillers and pointing out how often this very idea has shown up in fiction. A high-tech island prison for the elite gone rogue? It sounds like a Black Mirror episode, and that's exactly why it sticks. If there's one thing history teaches us, it's that the biggest moves often happen out of sight. And with Alcatraz suddenly back in the national spotlight, people are asking who's really pulling the strings behind this. Because this kind of project doesn't just restart overnight. It takes money, logistics, and above all, deals. So far, the federal government has released almost no official details about the funding or contractors involved, but the clues are piling up. Maritime traffic near the island has quietly increased, with unmarked vessels reportedly carrying heavy equipment and reinforced containers. Satellite images show movement at odd hours. A few reporters tried to dig into recent procurement records, but much of the information is either redacted or buried in unrelated budgets. That's raised one giant red flag: black money. Insiders suggest the funding might be tucked into classified sections of national security spending. That's not illegal, but it does mean zero public oversight. No hearings, no debates, just quiet approvals and blurred signatures. And that's where the concern begins. Some tech names keep appearing again and again: private defense firms, security contractors, and even a few companies known for advanced surveillance AI. One of them? A firm with ties to military-grade drone development. Another? Allegedly consulted on digital inmate monitoring systems that use predictive behavior algorithms. Yes, predictive, as in monitoring someone for what they might do. There are also whispers of high-profile individuals being involved. Billionaires with ties to infrastructure, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence. If the theories are true, these individuals may not just be contractors, they may be investors. That changes the picture entirely, because when profit enters the prison system, motivations get murky fast. One of the more persistent rumors is that Elon Musk's tunneling company has been contacted about developing deep access routes under the bay. Musk hasn't confirmed anything, but his previous ventures into underground transport give the theory weight. Whether it's for supply routes, emergency evacuations, or something more secretive, no one knows for sure. All of this could point to a prison unlike anything the US has ever operated, not just maximum security, but maximum secrecy. A place where the rules are written by those building it, not the people watching from outside. Critics warn that this level of silence around government contracting can lead to massive abuse of power. There are no public bids, no clear accountability, and no concrete timeline. If this facility is being built in the shadows, what else is being planned out of view? As the buzz around reopening Alcatraz grows louder, there's one institution that hasn't been clapping, and that's the military. While President Trump continues to rally support around the idea of turning the island into the country's most secure detention facility, some high-ranking voices inside the Pentagon are sounding alarms behind closed doors. Officially, the Department of Defense hasn't released a statement, but according to recent leaks and anonymous sources cited by multiple outlets, there's internal disagreement about what this plan could lead to. Not because the military opposes stronger national security, but because they're deeply uneasy about the lack of clarity around the mission, oversight, and who exactly will have control once Alcatraz is active again. A confidential memo reportedly circulated within the Joint Chiefs of Staff outlines concerns about overlapping jurisdiction. The worry that a facility like this, sitting in federal hands but potentially operated by private security forces, could bypass existing military protocols and legal safeguards. In simpler terms, too much power in too few hands. There's also chatter about something called Project Sentinel, a term mentioned in encrypted messages flagged by watchdogs. Though unconfirmed, some believe it refers to a broader initiative that includes Alcatraz as a pilot site for next-gen detainment and surveillance models. If true, this would pull the military into a program they weren't consulted on, and that's not sitting well with everyone in uniform. Some retired generals have gone on record carefully to express discomfort. One commented, "If this facility exists outside of the usual chain of command, it creates a dangerous precedent. We've seen what happens when power operates without transparency. There's also strategic tension." Alcatraz, while iconic, isn't an ideal military asset. It's exposed, expensive to maintain, and limited in scale. Using it as a testbed for political messaging rather than national defense could dilute its purpose. Military planners are trained to think long-term, and many see this as a short-term media grab with long-term complications. Add to that the issue of optics. Internationally, a reopened Alcatraz could look like the US is bringing back Cold War-style isolation tactics. That gives other global powers ammunition to question America's human rights record, something the military tries to avoid getting entangled in. And yet, there's pressure. Some in the administration are reportedly pushing for military logistics support helicopters, drones, even naval cooperation for island security. If approved, it forces the Pentagon into a role it didn't choose and may not fully support. President Trump's recent directive to reopen Alcatraz as a high-security federal prison has not only stirred domestic debate but also captured international attention. While the proposal is primarily a U.S. internal matter, its symbolic implications have prompted reactions from various quarters abroad. In Europe, media outlets have highlighted the historical significance of Alcatraz and questioned the practicality of reviving a facility that was closed in 1963 due to high operational costs and deteriorating infrastructure. Some commentators have expressed concerns about the message this move sends regarding the U.S. approach to criminal justice and incarceration. In Latin America, particularly in countries with historical ties to the U.S., the announcement has been met with a mix of skepticism and criticism. Analysts point out that the decision could be perceived as a step backward in terms of prison reform and human rights considerations. Asian media coverage has varied, with some outlets focusing on the logistical challenges of reopening Alcatraz, and others interpreting the move as a political statement aimed at reinforcing a tough-on-crime image. Human rights organizations have also weighed in, emphasizing the importance of transparency and adherence to international standards in any plans to reactivate the prison. They caution against potential human rights implications and urge the U.S. government to consider the broader consequences of such a decision. While the full extent of global diplomatic responses remains to be seen, it's evident that the proposal to reopen Alcatraz has resonated beyond U.S. borders, prompting discussions about criminal justice policies, historical symbolism, and the international perception of American governance. As the situation develops, it will be important to monitor both domestic and international reactions to understand the broader implications of this controversial initiative. It hasn't happened yet, but the potential is growing, and it's not hard to see how it could. When President Trump announced plans to reopen Alcatraz as a functioning federal prison, the move triggered more than just political debate. It sparked something deeper, symbolic, emotional, and ripe for transformation into something even more powerful, a new national icon. Alcatraz has always carried an almost mythic status. The name alone evokes stories of impossible escapes, isolation, and iron-fisted justice. It's been the backdrop of countless films, novels, and documentaries. But now, with the idea of giving it a second life, that myth could evolve from history into ideology. There's already a wave of symbolism building around the island. Trump's mention of locking away the worst of the worst has opened the door for some supporters to treat Alcatraz as more than just a facility. In some online spaces, the island is being framed as a representation of strength, order, and taking back control. That kind of narrative can quickly grow beyond politics and turn into belief. If Alcatraz is rebranded as the place where justice is finally served, not just through trials but through high-security removal from society, it could become something more than a prison, a symbol of authority, of cleansing, of who belongs and who doesn't. And when symbols take root in political culture, they can evolve fast. The risk is that the island could begin to attract a type of reverence, not officially, not legislatively, but socially and emotionally. Supporters may start using its image as shorthand for hardline justice. Merchandise, memes, hashtags, those already exist in early forms. If the plan moves forward, that imagery could gain momentum. And once something becomes a symbol of belief, it doesn't take much for cult-like devotion to follow. The process wouldn't require anything dramatic at first, just repetition. Repetition in speeches, repetition in visuals, repetition in slogans. That's how meaning attaches itself slowly, then all at once. And if that meaning is tied to punishment and exclusion, it may shape how a part of the public views everything from crime to dissent. Of course, this isn't a guaranteed path. Much of it depends on how the reopening unfolds, if it even happens. But the ingredients are there: a leader with strong influence, a setting loaded with cultural weight, and a population divided by fear, frustration, and loyalty. At this stage, nothing is certain, and yet everything feels possible. President Trump's announcement about reopening Alcatraz has already triggered national debate, legal disputes, and global attention. But the biggest question hanging over it all is simple. What happens next? For now, there's no official launch date, no confirmed construction timeline, no finalized list of who would be detained there. But judging by the escalating discussion, this isn't a headline that will fade quietly. And if the project really does advance, it could mark the start of a much larger shift, not just in criminal justice, but in how America handles power, punishment, and politics. Some experts believe the next phase could involve quiet federal groundwork feasibility studies disguised as infrastructure assessments, remote surveillance installations under the banner of coastal security, or even contracts signed through back channels to avoid public scrutiny. That wouldn't be unusual, and it wouldn't necessarily be illegal. But it would make it nearly impossible for the public to know what's happening until it's already in place. Others warn about the ripple effects. If Alcatraz is reactivated, even in a limited capacity, it might become a blueprint. A model tested in isolation, then replicated elsewhere on other islands, in remote regions, or even underground. A prison system that relies less on courts and more on classification. Less on trials and more on labels like national threat. There's also the possibility of legislative change. If political momentum builds around the Alcatraz revival, future proposals might follow stricter sentencing laws, broader definitions of internal threats, faster detention protocols. In moments of political intensity, policies that once seemed extreme can suddenly appear necessary. And history shows that once a security structure is built, it rarely gets dismantled. More speculatively, this could impact more than policy. It could shift public perception. If Alcatraz is rebranded as a symbol of restoration and order, it may influence how people think about justice itself. Harshness could be seen as efficiency, isolation as leadership, silence as security. And while it might sound far-fetched now, so did reopening Alcatraz until it was said out loud on a stage, broadcast worldwide, and backed by a sitting president. Whether it becomes a working prison again, a political symbol, or just a flashpoint in the culture war, one thing is clear: the Rock is no longer just a ghost from the past. It's back in the conversation. And depending on what happens next, it might change more than just the skyline of San Francisco Bay. It might change the entire tone of America's future. That's about it. How do you feel about Trump's decision? Write in the comments. For more useful information, watch other videos.